Good evening, and welcome to our podcast. We are People Against Covert Torture and Surveillance International. Today is Saturday, June 3rd. We're here on Mondays and Saturdays at 9 p.m. Eastern Time to educate and assist those who are targets of organized stalking, electronic harassment, and more, and to let you know that you are not alone. Views expressed during our podcast are those of our callers and not necessarily those of PACTS International. I'm Derrick, the moderator. Our guest this evening is neurobiologist Matt. Okay, Dr. Matt has recently joined us with our community, and we are very glad that he has. And even though he's very new, he has taken on some leadership roles and participated quite prominently in the rally in front of the White House last week in Washington, D.C. As a neurobiologist, he obviously has an eye for detail, which shows in the 500-page personal testimony that he wrote describing his initial targeting experiences in Canada. And tonight he shares information with us about the early days of his targeting and what he discovered about the technology and how it is being used on him. Okay, at this time I'd like to welcome Dr. Matt. Matt, if you could start fixed on your telephone as we begin our discussion. Okay, let me see if this is him. Hello, is that Matt?
No, this is Shannon.
Okay, hold on. Okay, let's see here. Matthew, are you there?
Yeah, Derrick, can you hear me?
Yes, now I can. Thanks a lot. Welcome to the call.
Thank you very much. Is the reception clear?
Yes, very clear. You're coming in very clear and very strong.
Okay, great.
Well, first of all, thanks for being here and coming on the program tonight to share about your experiences.
You're very welcome.
Okay, great. Why don't we start, Matthew, with some background information about you. And I'd like to share that. You're a neurobiologist.
I'm not currently a practicing neurobiologist, but I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
Okay, fine. If you could maybe tell us, why don't we start with your background a little bit, and you can tell us what about neurobiology and what a neurobiologist does.
Okay. Well, I have a master's degree in environmental toxicology from Virginia Tech, and after that I went to Cornell University to pursue a PhD in neurobiology and behavior. And for my dissertation research, I studied weakly electric fish. And weakly electric fish are sort of like specialists in using bioelectricity. And for my research, I did a lot of recordings of their electric signals and analysis of their electric signals. And I also studied them, did research on them in an evolutionary and genetic context. So I have expertise in genetics, systems neurobiology, especially sensory systems. And that's pertinent to what I want to talk to you about tonight. I'll get into that a little bit later.
Okay.
And after that, I did a postdoctoral training at the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center, and I did some really heavy genetics in a vertebrate system on performance traits. And I did do research for a few years, and I have about 34 peer-reviewed publications. But when I went up to Canada, I started working at a consulting company, an environmental consulting company. That job fell apart due to targeting. And I was in touch with you as I was sort of coming out of that, recovering from that, trying to get my life back together. And currently I work at another consulting company, and I'm actually a contractor, but I don't want to mention where I work currently for reasons. I don't want any.
Oh yeah, you don't have to go into that. Gosh.
Right. So I'm still working in a science-related, health-related field, but mostly what I do now is kind of like literature review, analysis of the medical literature, and ghostwriting for the department I work in.
Okay, great. All right, so can you tell us basically what happened and how you became targeted?
I'll briefly remind people. I've spoken on that before, but maybe not. This is the first time I've spoken on your call, so I'm really, really honored to be here. I believe, or all signs point to me moving into an apartment that was pre-rigged with electronic harassment devices, probably, who knows, but perhaps also surveillance devices. And I came to realize pretty quickly that I was living right across the alley from a building where all of this very bizarre late-night activity, actually around-the-clock activity, was going on. But it was not legitimate type activity. This was a non-residential building. It actually had a lot of medical. It had a combination of medical businesses working in there and also property management businesses. But I came to realize that there was a large number of young people cavorting in that place all the time, and in fact, there were a consistent presence of people dressed in camouflage suits on the roof, spying on different apartments. And at first, I thought they were just. I didn't know what to make of the building. I mean, I thought it was like an underground sex club or something at first. But when I came to realize, sorry, go ahead.
Can I ask you questions along the way?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I just like for clarification. Do you feel that this apartment that you moved into was rigged for you or for whoever perhaps would occupy that apartment?
I believe it was pre-rigged for whomever moved in there because it was within sight of this building, and I did not. There was no stalking that followed me into that building, and I didn't share any details with anyone of moving into that building. So I moved into that apartment. I mean, I moved in there just through my own apartment search, and I did learn from my landlord. I have no reason to believe that my landlord was involved in the stalking network. He's probably an unwitting patsy in this whole thing because he may have bought the apartment when it was already pre-rigged. But I did learn from him that the prior tenants, all of the prior tenants, only stayed there for a month or two each before moving out. And in fact, one of the prior tenants had done a fair amount of damage to the apartment, and that will be relevant to my story later. So I think it was rigged up because electronic harassment could be done on people in view of this essentially what I think is an organized crime group, partially for their amusement, perhaps to also try out some of their fancy new devices. I stayed there for slightly over 2 years, and eventually I came to find out, which I want to spend most of the time talking about, I came to find out that the apartment was very heavily rigged up.
Oh,
and I have samples from I have removed samples from the apartment, and that I think is key, and that's what I want to focus on. But when we get to that part, when you're ready for me to talk about that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, okay. It sounds interesting so far. So you were able to view what was happening across the alley in the adjacent building. Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
It was only 25 meters away.
Okay. And can you describe what types of activities were going on over there?
There was a lot of voyeurism or surveillance. There was visual harassment of surrounding apartments using various subtle illumination devices, fancier than laser pens, but things that wouldn't be very obvious to people, walking down below on the street. There was very constant sexual exhibitionism, again done in a very discreet way, but I mean, we're talking 3 floors of a non-residential building. Almost every night of the week would have things going on. When I took the time to look, I obviously I didn't spend all my time looking. But when you're sitting there working in your office, I set up my office in my solarium, which had giant glass windows, and some of these. It was almost like theater, like what people describe as street theater, but it was in the building 15 floors off the street level. And then even more eye-catching, if you can believe that, were some ceremonies, ceremonial type weekends. Every 3 times a year on a unpredictable basis, there would be 4-day parties that went on in there. And if you've ever seen the movie Eyes Wide Shut, there were appearances of people dressed in head-to-toe black robes. There was some ritualistic hazing going on. And I don't want to get into speculating too much about what this was, but it definitely had me wondering if this was like some kind of a pagan or satanic type or cult-like group. And I definitely believe there was some cult-like aspects to it, but I believe that was done, and this is just my speculation, that was done to sort of control the low-level gang stalkers through both rewarding them with these 4-day parties. I think a lot of the gang stalkers had drug dependency issues, and then also these ceremonies were meant to impress them and impress fear upon them. That's just my impression, and of course, I have no proof of that. That's just what these are the ideas that one naturally comes to when you see this happening. And I lived there for 2 years and a couple of months, and I mean, this was a continuous thing. It did take me a while to notice it at first because, I'm not the kind of person who sits there and stares out their window trying to see these kinds of things, especially since that building was supposed to be non-residential. I thought I had privacy, and it took a while, and eventually I realized that there were people constantly moving about in that building. And then when I would have these opportunities when the lighting was just right, or maybe they were allowing me to see it. If you let me say, one of the most shocking things that I ever saw was a ceremony, what appeared to be a ceremony. I was burning the midnight oil working on this publication that is now published, and I couldn't help noticing that there was 50 to 100 people sitting around in this medical building, and these guys dressed in these robes were floating about, meaning you can't see their feet, so as they move slowly, they look like they're floating about. And one of them took out a sword and pointed it up at my apartment. And it was shocking. I don't really like to talk too much about this because it sounds very outlandish, but I'm talking to a crowd that is used to dealing with a lot of outlandish theater. But I mean, that was threatening. I felt threatened by that. But I'm also kind of I don't back down easily, so I pulled my shades aside, and in front of all those people, I beckoned. I was beckoning him. I was like, come on, come and get me. And my sort of standing up and giving it back to them is what I think got me heavily targeted finally.
Oh, I see.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, let's see. A few questions come to mind. In your work there, I mean, did you work at home, or did you have an office that you went to, or?
I did have an office, but I worked at home a lot, and I published the biggest paper of my career, which was an experiment that I led and worked on for, something like six years prior to landing that job. And the final phases of writing that paper, I was the lead author. The final phases of writing that paper, I'll just tell you that that paper is published in the most prestigious journal, and at the time, the most prestigious science journal of all. And at the time, it was still under review, and so I was trying to get it published. It was a really big score, so I was kind of burning the midnight oil a lot. So I would work my day job, and then I would work on that paper evenings and weekends.
Okay, so that solarium was where you were doing a lot of your work. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and yes, all of my work. I lived in the apartments are very tiny in Vancouver, and that was my only working space. And at the beginning, for the first, I did see people sneaking about on the roof, but I didn't feel threatened by that at all. And for a long time, that building was mostly dark, and I just assumed there was no one in that building. So I would just leave my blinds totally open when I was working there, sometimes till 2 a.m. And when I finally realized that there were dozens of people with their binoculars looking at me and also spying on whatever other local residents, then I took steps to seal off my windows. But looking back, there were months and months where I was just sitting there thinking that I largely had privacy, when really I was under the microscope from those people. Wow. It felt so violating. I mean, they could have seen things on my computer screen, possibly in the reflection. There was a sliding glass door behind me, as in addition. So it was violating and shocking, and that's what kind of upset me and made me never back down. I got more and more aggressive with them, not in an illegal way, but standing up for myself. I never backed down until the directed energy weapons came out, and then I was running for my life.
Right. So I guess you felt like in the evening you had privacy, but maybe during the day they were like office people or something.
Right, I typically wasn't home during the day, and if you've ever, because the rental costs are so high in Vancouver, my apartment was only 600 square feet, so you tend to leave the windows open a lot, otherwise you feel cooped up. So, but once I realized that there were many people over there spying on me all the time, I sort of sealed up my apartment a lot better so they couldn't see in, but I still had a garden in my solarium also, and I really like plants, and so I had to leave that open to let the sunlight in too. And until the directed energy weapons were rolled out, I still was kind of like chalking this up to a bunch of very twisted people that were kind of violating other people's privacy, but not necessarily taking it to a further criminal level, and I let it go for a long time.
Oh, I see. So was this happening on various floors where you'd see this activity, and then also on the roof, or was it concentrated in one particular office? How was the activity?
Oh no, it was like the entire floors, but for the entire floor. Now, you wouldn't see people in all windows, but from time to time you would see them in various windows of every floor of that building, starting from 2 floors below me to the top of the building, like 5 floors. I mean, it was the person who someone has control, and I don't even know what the distribution of businesses are in there, but I mean, if investigators looked at this, they would probably see it's those businesses, or maybe there's one business that rents or owns those top floors. But it was vast. We're talking multiple floors of that building. Really?
Was this in British Columbia?
Yeah, Vancouver, British Columbia.
Vancouver. Matt, you know what? I have heard this, that particular area is a haven for witchcraft activity.
Yeah, I've heard those rumors too. But let's distinguish. I mean, the purpose of that ceremonial stuff, witchcraft, or because it had that overtone to it, the purpose of that isn't. I'm not thinking that is legitimate, actual witchcraft where they have tapped into the forces of nature somehow, but it is trickery and hocus pocus and ceremony used in order to scare people and to impress all the low-level gang stalkers. Because the one other thing that I saw in there,
so whether you believe in witchcraft or not, I mean, a lot of that activity is happening there.
Yeah, so I agree.
Okay, and that's basically all I'm saying about that.
Right. No, I'm not. I was saying that just I wanted to clarify for the purpose of the people listening in, because a lot of people have varying views on that. But yes, I have heard that, and yes, there were ceremonies that had overtones of dark ceremonies, and I saw ritual hazing, and I saw, or at least performances that were pretending to do ritual hazing or actual ritual hazing, and I saw simulated contact between adults and underage children, sexual contact, whether that was real or simulated. You can't really go to the police easily with that, though, because you have to have proof. And I saw other activities that looked like activities that were focused on training gang stalkers. In retrospect, it looked like that was a training camp for the major harassment network that is in Vancouver. That is what it looked like to me.
Well, I will share this with you, and it may tie into your particular experience. A while back, a few years ago, I was someone shared with me that they had been a stalker at one time.
Yes.
And this guy lived. He lived in the San Diego area. Mm-hmm. And so once he revealed that a 2-hour conversation with him ensued with many questions and so forth. But one of the things he said to me, on my questions, one of the things I asked him was how he was recruited and why he was doing the things that he was doing. And he said that the guy that recruited him, they didn't tell him why he was doing the things that he was doing. They just told him to do stuff. And then he also said that the guy that recruited him was a Satanist. And he said,
sorry, repeat that. Was a what? I just missed that one word. He was a what?
He was the guy that recruited him into the stalking program was a Satanist.
A Satanist, yes. Okay.
And then he said that he himself did not have to become a Satanist, but it would help him to move up in the program. That's incredible.
What you're saying matches my impressions, and as you know, I sent you my report, which I wrote before I had any contact with the TI community and before I even looked on the internet. And if you go back and read certain sections of my report, you will see that I came to the same overall conclusion.
Right. Yeah, it was going to take me a while to get all the way to the end of your report, Matthew. It's 500 pages.
Oh no, that's okay. It's a reference guide. It's basically I wanted to document that I'm not making this up as I go, not to you, but just in general. And I also there are tidbits in there that I think basically because I was unfortunate enough to be the one to move into that epicenter, I was able to collect some key pieces of evidence which could become significant. And because the evidence requires more substantiation and all of this, and because the story is so wild, I just wanted to document it all. And I'm sure the FBI has my report. I don't think they just trashed it. You don't get a report that has the word terrorism on it and throw it in the circular file. You at least I wanted my report to be available for FOIA requests in the future. That's essentially what I wanted. Okay.
Well, I think it's a good report, and you write really well. So it is interesting reading. And I've been able to follow some of the references that you made. For instance, the device that you were talking about, and you'll probably get into that in a while. And I did find the prototype for that on amazing1.com, and where this device can be found. It looks quite incredible and quite expensive. And one of the things it says is that only certain qualified, quote, personnel could purchase that device. So training process. But anyway, I'm probably getting ahead of your story here, but go ahead.
Well, just real quick, the device that I saw, I just want to be clear, resembled that device on Amazing One. I can't say for sure that it was that device, but it resembled that device. Okay. And the characteristics of the beam marks in the window were consistent with that device. The way I first came across that Amazing One webpage, in fact, is I was reading a report by a person by the name of F. Michael Maloof, who used to work as a consultant on terrorism for DOD, and he wrote some papers on the threats of directed energy weapons used by domestic terror groups. And he basically pointed out that they were becoming easy to acquire. And then when I went and looked at that device, because he referenced that device, when I looked at that device, I had like a chilling. When I saw it, I had this kind of like a chilling reminder. I was like, oh, that's the one. That's the device that I saw. That's kind of the feeling that I had. And yes, about their webpage is really bogus because they try to make it sound like these are legitimate scientific devices, but really anyone who has fake letterhead from a research company can buy one of these. They say that all you need to do is to provide letterhead of a research company, and then a company that sells night vision gear, pyrotechnics manuals, squirrel shockers, pain wave pistols. A company that sells those kinds of things is not a scientific supply company. It's practically like a harassment mercenary supply company. So
mercenary, yeah, that's the kind of impression that I had. These are people that are really seriously, some highly paid, companies, Harassment Incorporated type of personnel. That's where they get
exactly.
That's the impression I got from that website.
One more quick comment is that probably there are many other suppliers of these kinds of devices on the dark internet. Just happens to be a company on the clear web. And also, there's probably even way more advanced technology that's leaking out from military contractors, and there's probably even ways of making these devices homemade if you know what you're doing. So this is just one example, but just to be clear on that.
Sure. Well, let's see. Did you want to continue your story about the building and what you observed there? Or did you
what I would really like to do is, if we have the time, I don't know what your time constraints are, but there's a the beam marks in my window, which I discussed before, and I was a victim of many different forms of harassment, but there's one piece of key evidence that I haven't yet talked about ever, and I wanted to use this venue as a way of getting that out there if you think the callers would be interested, and more importantly, it's more importantly, if we're making a recording of this call, I wanted to basically document it for public consumption, and that's what I would like to lead you on a path down is discussing this other form of evidence, because I have the samples in my possession.
Oh, okay. Yes, we would like to hear about that.
Okay, so let me just start by, I'm going to give you a quick overview, and then if you want, you can ask me questions along the way, but the overview is that I allege, because it needs to be confirmed by someone with some serious know-how in microwave engineering, but my allegation is that the drywall in my apartment, where I was living right across the street from this, basically was some form of illicit drywall that serves as a transmission medium for microwave energy, and that drywall looks like ordinary drywall, but it is somehow serving as a waveguide or transmission medium for microwave energy, which then hits these points in the drywall, and at those points the beams get directed 90 degrees from the plane of the drywall into the occupied space. And I was harassed by this material at a low level for many months. It took me a while, but eventually my attention was drawn towards the drywall, and then I started doing little experiments where I would cut out little holes in the drywall where there was one of these focus points of microwave energy coming out. And what that would do, by doing that, it would eliminate the beam coming from that one spot. Then my targeting really ramped up. I was starting to get gang-stalked and even assaulted with powerful directed energy weapons outside of my apartment on the street. And I took those photographs of those beam marks, and I was really resisting these guys, and they just wanted me out of there. I think they knew that I was resisting and trying to collect evidence. And then there was one night near the end where they cranked up the amplitude of that, of whatever energy they were supplying to the drywall. They cranked it up, and I had already made the decision not to leave that apartment. So I ripped down the drywall as almost like to save my life, basically, because leaving my apartment was no longer an option. And because of that, I got the samples of drywall. And now when you look into the drywall, you can see very unusual items that are distributed just at the points, like the points occur something like every 25 centimeters in a grid all over the drywall. And so the drywall contains features that I've never seen ever in any other drywall. And when I show this to people, I almost sent you a sample to demonstrate this call. I decided not to because this material is very valuable. But everyone that I've shown this to in person, even though they've never been targeted, becomes convinced that there's something very unusual going on with the drywall. And so I would like to basically take a step back and go through some of the steps on that, because I don't want to just make an allegation without telling you that I have very careful reasons for making this allegation.
Okay. Well, Matthew, I did get as far as in your story as when you get to the drywall theory, and which I thought was interesting. So, yeah, I would like to hear more about this theory, because if it's happening to you, if this happened to you back then there are other examples of this elsewhere. I mean, this is probably not an isolated type of technology. It's probably happening to other people.
Exactly.
So yeah, we can need to look into this somehow. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, well, so that's one of the points that I wanted to make, is that, first of all, I don't claim that this is, there's no universal way of doing electronic harassment. And this form of electronic harassment might be rare, but I already know that I already believe strongly that I encountered this material at 3 different locations in Vancouver, and there is a YouTube video by a Belgian TI named, I'm not going to be able to pronounce it right, but I think the Flemish pronunciation is Cliff Huylebroeck, and anyway, I'm not going to try to pronounce that again, but he's a TI in Belgium, and he uploaded a video to YouTube called Electronic Harassment in Belgium. And when I saw this video, again, I wrote my report I wrote down my allegations and collected my samples and hightailed it out of Canada, and was clearly a high-value target. Once I had those samples, I was a high-value target, which is why I went underground. But I had no prior knowledge, but when I came across Cliff's video, he shows a scan of a wall in Belgium using an EMF meter with an audio ticker on it, and he's put pins in the wall where you can hear the meter revving up. It's going like bop, 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 brrr, right when he comes across a point on the drywall. He's put the pins all over his wall, and the distribution of those points it's frighteningly similar to what I experienced. And so so there's a possibility that this illicit drywall is in somewhat widespread use around the world. Of course, it's only useful for electronic harassment when someone pre-rigs a space, if they're going to rent their apartment out to someone or a hotel room. It's not the kind of electronic harassment where they can stalk you with it, but it's a pre-installed type of electronic harassment. So yes, I have some indication that there are multiple accounts of this material around the world, and that is significant.
Well, there are some actually that are making similar allegations, Matt, about chemicals. They are saying that they're placing on the walls, and there are some that spend a lot of time and energy washing down walls and changing rooms in hotels because they feel that the walls are tainted somehow. So
yes,
might coincide with those reports.
Well, yes. So it was an interesting experience. Let me just make one thing clear. The part about this mystery that I don't know and that I can only speculate on is how the energy is supplied to the drywall, because it doesn't look like there's anything in the drywall that would generate the microwave energy, because you would think that there might be you would need to supply an electric current into little tiny magnetrons. It's not like that. Instead, what I see looks more like a transmission medium, which means that somewhere there needs to be a radio wave generator or a magnetron type device or a high power microwave generator that is situated in a neighboring unit, hidden behind a wall, or something that supplies the energy to the drywall. I can't claim that I encountered that. So that is there is a missing piece here. And even my claim that the drywall is a transmission medium needs to be validated by, I would like the FCC and the FBI. I offered them samples. I'm just trying to get the word out because I have the samples, and that is very key. The samples themselves could reveal that crimes have been done just in the samples, because these kinds of technologies do not belong hidden in drywall.
Right. Well, if we can get some corroborating evidence, Matt, then you definitely have a case.
Well, the purpose of this call and this recording, besides just being honored to come on your call, and I told you I wanted to do that, and I'm really happy to be here. And once I get done describing this, certainly we can have a general conversation. I'd love to hear if anyone has any questions in general about anything. But I do want to say a few more things about this for the sake of the recording.
Okay.
Okay. So now I think my training is sort of perfect for thinking about how we sense things and how we might sense different types of electromagnetic beams or fields. That's not really something I studied. I studied the electric sense, but I have a general, a very solid background in sensory biology. And so the way that I first sensed this, that something was going on, was that I would be in my apartment and I would feel what felt like a flea bite or a spider bite or some kind of insect bite, or it almost felt like a campfire spark landing on my skin and burning out an instant later. And this went on for months. It didn't go on all the time, but it was like they were whoever was perpetrating this harassment against me was turning this grid on. And I was taking care of a friend's cat during that time, and the cat started to exhibit very sickly behavior too, which also attracted my attention. And over time, so taking a step back, after I was electronically harassed, I sort of got this impression, and I think most TIs, targets of electronic harassment, will agree, is that sometimes with our eyes closed, we can sense the directionality of these beams. And I think the way that you do that is that when the beam is thin enough and the beam is powerful enough, it produces a thermal pain on the surface of your skin where it hits you, but also that it produces an instantaneous electrical thermal jolt that goes into your body, and you can feel the trajectory along which that travels. Would you say that that matches? Would you agree with that assertion that sometimes you can feel the trajectory of these beams?
Okay. That's something, Matt, that you probably have to ask those in the group that have that experience.
Okay, because there's many different kinds of electronic harassment.
Yes, I mean, I'm going to get the voices, and there are things that I see when I close my eyes, but they aren't electronic things.
Okay, well that's relevant because other kinds of beams, I mean, I had a whole range which allowed me to think about this, but then when the field is broad, when the beam is very broad, and it covers your entire body, when you're just sort of bathed in it, and it's at a low amplitude or a very high amplitude, I notice that you don't really have this sense because your whole body is stimulated or the amplitude is too low. So it's only special kinds of beams, in my opinion, where you get this directionality information. You don't always get it. But it tends to be when beams are thin in diameter and sufficiently powerful to cause thermal pain. And even if they only cause thermal pain on the surface of your skin, reflexively you just attend to that side of the body. You feel, let's say you feel a burn on the side of your abdomen. You will reflexively turn. You'll look at it and you'll say, did something bite me there? But if that beam is a little bit stronger and it penetrates inside, now you can sort of feel the trajectory of that. And the way that I think that works is that you have thermal pain receptors distributed on the surface of your skin, on your dermis, in your muscles, in your bones, in your internal organs. In other words, there's thermal pain receptors and polymodal pain receptors and free nerve endings at different depths in your body. And when a beam passes into your body, sometimes you can feel, as a sense of pain, you can feel that line of pain in your body. And sometimes it only lasts a split second. So it's not necessarily... That's clear, Matthew. That's entirely understandable. Yeah, you could sense the trajectory, is what you're saying. Okay, yeah. So I guess I'm going on and on because I'm thinking in terms of people who have never been targeted before. I want to just make sure that people know that I'm clear on this and that there's a scientific basis for this. But in any case, that's clear. Mm-hmm. In any case, this is what drew my attention to the wall, and I could actually even hold the back of my hand over one of these points and find, with a high degree of precision, where that focal point of energy was coming out of the wall, and that's how I was able to disable these points. Now, let me say a few things about what the drywall looks like on the inside. Okay, so when if I can edit this recording, what I will do is I will add some photographs of what I'm talking about to the recording so that people can have visuals for what I'm talking about. But I was sure there was something going on in the drywall. The stalking network certainly was not pleased when they realized that I had torn large pieces of drywall off the wall. That's a radical move. I'm not suggesting that TIs do this because you can get. I had to pay. I had to compensate my landlord $12,000 for that damage. But there may be ways of collecting smaller samples. But in any case, I was upset and I was going to do everything I could. Now, when I got to my cousin's place in Washington, I wanted to photograph and examine the drywall. This is I hadn't had the chance to do that yet. I was on the run. I had been on the run. And so what I did was I purchased, because I have lab experience in biology, not in microwave engineering, but still I've done a lot of microscopy. And when you do microscopy, you often use different light sources to shine on things in order to illuminate different materials in biological tissues. So just on a hunch, I purchased one of these black lights, which is like a little flashlight, and it's used for detecting pet urine stains. Are you familiar with those?
Well, yeah, that's exactly what some individuals in our group use to detect, this type of activity in the walls, like you're describing.
Okay, that's great. So hopefully we can get together. Hopefully I can talk to some of those people. I will encourage conversations after this. But some of the pieces of drywall that I ripped down still had my little cuts where I used a utility knife, like a fine gauge utility knife that an artist would use to gouge a little divot into the wall. And so, and there was wallpaper on this drywall. And one thing that I noticed is when I shined my black light onto the drywall. In fact, I'm actually doing it right now. I took a piece out. I've got this stuff safely stored in 3 separate locations, secret locations, in addition to the piece that I have in front of me right now. But when you look with this black light, what you'll notice is that right around the divots that I gouged out to disable those thin beams, I see this like copper orange fluorescence that looks incredibly iridescent, almost sparkly, and it's not visible at all when I take the light away. And then if I look into the core of the drywall, at those same points or distributed sort of in the same distribution in the interior of the drywall, are these points about the size of a BB of that same coppery orange fluorescence, and it's like jewel-like. It's coruscating or sparkling when I shine this light on it. It's a very interesting fluorescence.
I am going to demonstrate the fluorescence on the surface and inside one of these pieces of drywall. This is one of my evidence bags. When I collected the drywall samples in Vancouver, I immediately stored them in these bags, which I labeled, and I've stored them that way ever since. This is one of my drywall samples with embedded EMP emitters. EMP stands for electromagnetic pulse. EMP emitter is my term. This is bag 1 of 3 of the large pieces, which I collected from apartment 1501 at 1189 Howe Street at approximately 2 a.m. on January 27th, 2016. I have a tube-style fluorescent black light or UV light. I also have 2 of these handheld pet urine detecting black lights, and I'm going to use those to illuminate the drywall so I can show you the fluorescence. Here's one of my pieces of drywall. This is the wallpaper, which has peeled away from the drywall a little bit. So this is the surface of the drywall that is facing into the apartment. And this is the surface of the drywall that's facing away from the apartment. I'm going to turn the black light on, turn the main light off. Take a closer look at this wallpapered surface, and here is a good example of the ring of fluorescence. And you can see if I turn the black light off, fluorescence is gone. And if I turn the overhead light on, it swamps out the fluorescence. You can see it a little bit. The black light is still on. Now the black light is off. Black light on. Black light off. Now in this particular case, you cannot see the point of fluorescence on the edge of the drywall because this ring of fluorescence is a couple centimeters away from the edge. But I know from previously examining and handling this, if I were to dig in here slowly, I would eventually come to the embedded point of fluorescence. I don't want to do that because I'm trying to preserve my remaining samples as intact as possible so they can be examined eventually by someone with know-how and so that they can be preserved for litigation purposes. But if you do look on this edge, you can see a good example of part of one of those internal points of fluorescent material embedded, clearly embedded into the drywall. And you can see some deposition right there of the same fluorescent material. So I believe that the microwave energy somehow transmits through the plane of the drywall this way, and when it hits this material here, it is reflected or redirected in this direction into the occupied space. And that results in this deposition pattern over time. There's a little bit of deposition right here. So again, if I dig through the drywall right there, just under there, about a centimeter from the edge, there's probably almost certainly another one of those fluorescent points. And just to show you how striking this fluorescence is, I will turn the black light off, turn it back on, and I'll turn the overhead light on and off too. And you can still see the fluorescence. So now I've got the black light on, and you can still see the fluorescence. Black light off, black light on, black light off, black light on. I don't like to handle this stuff very much anymore because I'm trying to preserve it, but just now a piece fell off of the drywall, and this piece was close to another one of those points too. You can see some of the fluorescence inside the drywall. And let's see if we can see that fluorescence. See how it glitters? Let's see if we can see that fluorescence with the overhead light on. I'm going to leave the black light still on. Okay, I'm going to start turning the black light on and off. Okay, it's not showing up very well, so that's not giving off as much fluorescence. It's fainter. So that's not one of those actual points of fluorescence. It's probably just some scattered deposition around one of those points. I'm not exactly sure where that piece fell off.
And it's almost like under my model, I believe that the microwave energy travels parallel to the surface of the drywall, and when it hits those points, it's redirected into the space. And I think during that process of being reflected into the occupied space, I think some of that material gets vaporized and redistribute it in a ring around one of those emitters. I call them in my report, I call them electromagnetic pulse emitters. And so there's a possible way for people to potentially turn the lights off in their apartment and scan the walls for this orange fluorescence. And if they see that, my feeling is that they shouldn't assume poisoning through a chemical poison. That they should potentially think that maybe they're getting poisoned through being bathed in microwave energy.
Okay. Well, that's an interesting theory, Matt, and I'm sure that those that are affected by this will be glad to talk to you about it.
Mm-hmm. One more quick thing I would like to say, another feature, the last feature that is important to point out is that when I fracture the pieces of drywall, there are these parallel fibers that are extremely fragile that are lined up in parallel orientation to the surface of to the plane of the wall. And another TI who has decades of experience and a lot of know-how in this pointed out in a sort of critical way, being critical in a constructive way, that could just be any material in drywall. But I've never seen those kinds of hairs in drywall before, and it's possible that those are also somehow part of this transmission system. But of course, I need to have all of these allegations checked by someone who knows how to deal with transmission media and waveguides, and I think probably there's two ways to do the validating, and then I'll stop talking about specifics after I say this. But the one way to do validating is that there are compounds in microwave engineering and material science that are used in like cell phones and all kinds of things that have miniature microwave receiving and transmitting surfaces in them. And those compounds are things like microwave transmitting nanoscale three-dimensional electromagnetic crystals. If you look in the literature, you find references to fibers impregnated with far infrared emitting ceramic nanoparticles and these things called MTO ceramics. So in other words, there are materials that are specifically designed for microwave transmission. And if those are present in the drywall, and if I could get a federal regulatory agency to look at that and see those, that would already should raise some eyebrows in law enforcement. And then the other way to test this, which I discussed with another TI who has some expertise in relevant areas of science, would be if I could ever get regulators to look at this seriously, if you supplied microwave energy or shined microwave energy into the drywall, if you could get it to actually transmit and reproduce one of these beams, that would be a strong demonstration as well. And I'm just hoping that we can reach some sensitive people in law enforcement that will take these allegations seriously, because I have the samples. I have enough samples to distribute around, and anyone who hears this recording who works in law enforcement or engineering or federal regulatory agencies can contact me, and I will provide them with those samples.
Okay, great. Well, Matthew, what you have described is not exactly new to our community. Let me just say again, because there are a couple of guys that I know of that have this experience or have this suspicion, I guess, of some type of something in the walls. And I think they believe it's chemicals or something, but it seems to coincide with what your suspicions are. So
well, that makes me very happy to hear that. It makes me very happy to hear that these are not brand new allegations, because that means that maybe we can get some corroborating stories.
And I know exactly who they are, and I can connect you to them. And
okay, do that.
Yeah, can work through whatever theories, and maybe come up with something that's coherent. or that's, that's something you can present to officials or whatever.
That's great. I would really like that.
Okay.
I think it's just important to keep getting the word out because my hope is that we still may not be able to. I certainly don't have resources to, pay for tests, and I'm really hoping that someone who is a friend of our cause, working behind the scenes, will hear about this and say, hey, this guy has samples. Or eventually the truth will come out, but it's only going to come out if we talk about it. And that's what I'm trying to do. And I would love to hear from your contacts. So please put me in touch after this, tomorrow or next week. We can do that.
Yeah, that'll be fine. And also a good lead here would be Dr. Standinger, the toxicologist from Los Angeles. She might be able to either examine the samples herself, if you'd like to send her one, or she will probably be able to direct you to a lab where they could be looked at, and she would know exactly where to send them.
That's great. If you can facilitate that, I would like that a lot.
Yeah, like a forensics lab or what have you. So these are some possibilities for you, Matthew. So I hope that gives you some, direction there.
That would be great. The only request that I would have, and I'm not saying this to the people that you just mentioned, but because this call is going to be recorded, I'll just say it in general, is that the samples are valuable. I mean, I went through hell and lost my job. My life was devastated, and I had to compensate my landlord for doing the damage. And I do have large samples, but not. They're still finite. They're valuable. So my request is that anyone who wants to look at these treats them like gold, and whatever findings that they get, they agree to make those findings publicly known. That's what I would like.
Okay. Well, all right. Well, as I said, there's some guys that could work with you on this particular issue, and that could be something quite revealing, I would guess. If this turns out to be yet another actual form of harassment, and this is something, we're talking about hotels and motels that across the nation that might be affected by this. So this could be very important.
Yeah, can I share two quick stories about where I encountered this material in other locations in Vancouver?
Okay, sure.
Okay, so thank you. So once I had really confronted this ritualistic, satanic-like harassment network, and they pulled out all the stops, then like most TIs who get the heavy gang stalking at the beginning and maybe forever, the feeling of how it becomes. You go down this weird path where all of a sudden it becomes clear that in the community that you were residing in, there was a pre-existing harassment network composed of hundreds of people. I mean, it's a very bizarre feeling. It's very frightening at first, but that was revealed to me, and they were using very intense directed energy attacks in public wherever I went, and also into my apartment. And so when that happened, there were times when I was desperately trying to get away from it. And I remember one time I went to the airport and I called CSIS. I called my lawyer first, and then I called CSIS, which was the Canadian version of the CIA, and they said, I told them that I was under directed energy attack, and they said, you have to report that to local police. And I said, well, if I do that, you know what they're going to do to me. They're going to put me into a mental hospital. So they said, sorry, we can't help you. And then I checked into, and then I called a hotel booking service and checked into a hotel, which happened to be in downtown Vancouver. I wasn't really looking carefully enough, and I was like, oh, that was a mistake. I'm going back to the heart of darkness. But in any case, I checked into the hotel, and somehow I was checked into a room that I believe also was pre-rigged this way. Yeah, this stuff might be in use. Where these harassment networks are big, each hotel that's part of the harassment network might have their pre-rigged room of horrors, their electronic harassment room / torture chamber room, and when they see a target come in, they assign them to that room. I think that's what happened to me. But what I wanted to share with you is that as they started to radiate me in that same way from the walls, in this particular case, I was very upset, and I had my X-Acto knife with me, and I did probably what it would have been thousands of dollars of damage to that room. Thousands of dollars.
God, Matthew. Oh, wow.
Well, hey, Derrick, that's my personality type. I'm a fighter. But now here's the thing, and I'll even tell the room. I don't care anymore. I do not care. I'm going to be completely public about this. It was room 2209 at the Coast Plaza Hotel and Suites, which is on let's see, 1763 Comox Street. Now, the second to last day that I was in that, and let me say that by disabling those things in the walls, it was ameliorating and minimizing the attack. As I was disabling those, I could feel that I was creating bubbles of safety for myself.
I see. So you were getting relief when you were cutting up the wall.
Yes, and I was trying to do it in as surgical a way as possible. Now, it's very important for me to emphasize that these were radical moves, and I am not suggesting that people do this. But since I went through this process, I am going to share what I learned from it. I think you can do more very careful approaches to check for this stuff, but I am not suggesting that people do this, because you can get yourself into a lot of trouble, and you can get yourself incarcerated in a psychiatric hospital if you do these kinds of things.
Yeah.
But since I have the information, I am going to share it. So if you give me just 5 or 10 more minutes, I'll continue and finish this story. So then I went out on the streets 2 days before I left. I had already done extensive. I was finding all kinds of other devices in the room too, not just the drywall. And I went out on the street and I was gang-stalked heavily for 12 hours with portable directed energy weapon. And then I came back. Derrick, are you still there?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I got another call. I just wanted to make sure. So I came back to the room after being gang-stalked for 12 hours. I came back to the lobby, and I went up to the front desk. And you know how a lot of this is very psychological, and it's like a game of chess that you're playing with these psychopaths.
Oh,
and I went up to the lobby, and very calmly, after being hit with directed energy for 12 hours straight in the grocery store and on the streets, and the person behind the lobby, this young woman in her early 20s, goes, "Let me guess, you want to change rooms." And I turned to her with I looked at her with a very kind of a smirk on my face, and I said, "No, what on earth would make you ask that? I don't want to change rooms." I said, "I have 2 duffel bags of stuff up there. I just went grocery shopping, and I don't want to cart that into a new room. I'm happy with my room." So that's just an anecdote to say that, like, there were these other bizarre things that were happening that were informing me that something odd was going on with that room. Then the night before I checked out of the hotel, at midnight, I went down to the drugstore. I purchased some hair wax, and I got some skin bronzing stuff to match the dingy tan color of the walls. I mixed it into a paste, and I patched the 200 holes that I had made in the walls. I just smeared that stuff in there, and this was a fairly mid to upper level range hotel. And that's how I checked out of the hotel. And by the way, I checked out of the hotel 2 hours late because I was so tired from being gang stalked. And I never heard a thing. I never got a call. My credit card never got charged. And I find that very suspicious. So after doing $2,000 worth of damage to that hotel room.
Wow. Well, you certainly had a lot of experiences, Matt, with this stalking issue. Wow. Is there anything that you'd like to add before we talk to the callers?
Yeah, just quickly, mostly in case he's listening, there was a former friend of mine whose name is Stephen. This is the last anecdote, and I can say this in 5 minutes. I'll tell you this, and then we'll go to open conversation. So a former friend of mine, Stephen, proved to be part of this large stalking network in Vancouver, which tells me that a lot of non-hardened criminals and just even semi-ordinary people are getting swept up into this craziness. And when I was flushed out of my apartment, I couldn't go back to my apartment. In fact, I was locked out of my fob key didn't work. They knew that I had the pieces of drywall, and I had disguised myself. I had to spend the whole night in the concrete stairwell. Otherwise, I would have gotten fried in my apartment. Not from the drywall, but they were firing it into my apartment from neighboring units. And I disguised my appearance. I put on an unfamiliar pair of glasses. All I had was my passport, my cell phone with those key photographs of burns on my body and the beam marks in the window, and I had the drywall samples. And I didn't get to the bus stop in time to buy a ticket out of town, so I had to spend one more night in town. And I called my friend and I said, can I stay at your place? I have nowhere else to go. And he went in, when I was at his place. I bought him dinner, and his name is Stephen, and he lives at Hornby Court Apartments. It's a large building. I won't tell you which unit he lives in, but that's 1330 Hornby Street. And he went into his shower to pretend like he was taking a shower or to shower, and he activated that grid in his apartment. And, of course, I didn't do damage to his apartment. But just before he had done that, he did this really sinister display where he went into his closet. And I had not told him that I had damaged my place, but he went into his closet and retrieved a fire axe, which had a shredded handle because one of his friends had attacked his walls in his luxury condo. And that was also a very odd thing because it was just so like it was gaslight. It was theater. It was pure theater, and it was very sinister too. And this guy works he is a interior designer for a condo remodeling company. Now, this doesn't prove anything, but I find these connections to be very, very suspicious. And I know that I had the same sensation in his place where he went into his shower. As soon as he went into his washroom, the grid was activated. 20 minutes later, when he came out of his shower, as soon as he departed his washroom, the grid was deactivated. I had no place to go, so I just curled up on his sofa and slept. And then the next morning, before he woke up, before sunrise, I left, and then I hightailed it out of town as quickly as I could. And the last thing I want to say is that the stamp, so that this is in the recording, the stamp on these pieces of drywall is, and I'm not sure if this is a fake stamp or if this is significant, but this is West Rock Industries Limited. WESTROC Industries Limited, and it's also in French, Les Industries Westrock Limitées, because Canada is a bilingual country. And okay, I think I've conveyed all the details that I wanted to get on the recording, and I know I just threw a lot at you, but I wanted to make that publicly available and documented in a recording. And now I can just answer whatever other questions you might have, or talk about whatever, or we can open it up for general discussion if you want.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, what you described is not unheard of in this community. So maybe that should kind of ease your mind a little bit.
Yeah, that's good to know. I was actually pretty nervous because I didn't want to say something that the community would think of as wild or grandstanding or off the
wall, so to speak.
Yeah. Nice one, Derrick. That's okay. No, but that's good. That's good to know. You were? Did you have that one reserved?
I was waiting for the opportunity.
Oh, cool. Perfect.
Okay. That was very much impromptu, but anyway, it's nice to have a laugh in there once in a while.
Yeah, sure.
But there are guys in the group that have mentioned about the walls and things like that, and even one talks a lot about people using these the black light to detect the what he says chemicals. But if you guys compare notes, you might find some commonalities. Who knows?
That's great. I mean, clearly, just for the record, I can't prove that my theory is right. It's just an allegation, and clearly the orange stuff on the wall, and it's not just orange. It is like super fluorescent coppery orange. It is a chemical. I just don't think that its function is to do a chemical poisoning. I think that it's somehow integrated into this transmission system, but I already made myself clear on that, and we need to get to the bottom of it. So that's great to know, Derrick.
Sure.
I'm glad that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they might. At least one of them might be here. He's sometimes here at our call. Hopefully, he'll be here tonight. Maybe he heard that.
Okay.
But anyway, thanks for sharing that, Matthew. It's quite a story. And as wild as it was for you, there are many in our community that have had to do similar things, to save their life. The Great Escape and all this, and there are many people that sleep outside their homes because of all the targeting that goes on inside their homes and things like that. So it's not unusual.
Absolutely. I spent many a night sleeping out of my apartment when all this was happening, and many a sleepless night. But yeah, thank you for letting me share that story. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm sure that there are people here that can relate to what you shared. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, thanks, Matthew. Well, guys, this is Dr. Matthew, and he has shared a really exciting story with us. And I'm sure that some of you have similar stories, with the experiences with these torturous technologies and so forth, and trying to deal with that. So at this time, guys, I'm going to open the lines. I'm going to have to change venues here. Just a second.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Who's there?
I have a question. Well, actually, we've lived in this story house for a year and a half, and the seams in the
that was hard. Okay, go ahead.
So the seams in the upper story and the middle story, they're coming apart, and it looks like that there's some kind of lines run through them. But they used to be just flush, like the rest of the wall. And now the seams are most of them are like coming apart.
Well, would you like to send me a photo?
What's that?
If you want to send me a photo, I can take a look at it and give my opinion on it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sure.
Okay. If you could get James to talk to if you could get James to talk to Matt. Because
yeah, that's what I wanted to add.
Okay, hold on a second, please. Oh wow, a lot of people are. Okay, James. Don, if you could get James to talk to Matt because they kind of can compare notes. James is. Hello.
Derrick, James.
All right, James. Yeah, I was just talking with Matt earlier about people have that experience with chemicals in the walls or something.
Yeah,
and you might be able to share some notes with him.
Okay.
Hi, James.
No, Matt, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, James.
Okay, well, you mentioned orange, and that's something that people don't always mention. I've come across two different types of chemicals. One I attribute to being to make someone more electrically sensitive, and another one that I've come in contact with was that orange.
Okay. Hold on just a second. I'm going to need to kind of hold on. I'm going to need to mute the call for a second.
All right.
Okay, James, if you could star 6, and Matt, if you could star 6.
Hi, James. Is this James from Gold Beach, Oregon? Oh, hi, James. How are you?
Hi. So that chemical that you mentioned, there's two different types that I know of, and this is like a really basic, fundamental thing that I've just noticed as I've gone along. I've done some empirical testing with aluminum foil, where these chemicals would be. I just took an off the shelf chemical process, which is chemical vapor deposition. It seems most like that. There's chemicals coming off the wall, and they will go right through the aluminum foil. And you hold it up to light, and it's like you got a shower of this stuff. And it just made, instead of just hitting the aluminum foil and stopping, it went right through it. So it'll go through a couple of layers of it, and then it gets on you, and that orange stuff stings like bee stings. Does that mean anything to you?
No. I never had the sensation that a chemical was getting on me during this.
Oh, you wouldn't. It wouldn't.
Well,
you can't feel it.
Oh, okay. But the stinging for sure. That I felt was an electromagnetic beam, because I could be standing 8 feet, 10 feet away from the wall and get that, and it was a continuous beam, but it would burn sometimes, like in little flashes. But then I could follow that beam back to the wall. And one thing I just want to mention, just for clarity, is that the orange chemical or material that's both inside the drywall and redeposited on the surface of the drywall is only visible under ultraviolet light.
Yeah, I've come in contact with that before. But perps will put it on the wall, and I have seen it. I have seen wallpaper that was like that, and I found that very difficult to believe, and I'm still kind of like not really believing it. But this was just a chemical. When I cleaned that chemical, that orange stuff off the wall, I wouldn't get hit with it anymore. Now, remember I said when you put aluminum foil in front of it, I put the aluminum foil on the wall where I thought it was coming from, and it would come through right there, and then I put it on myself where they were shooting it, and then it would go through that. So, that's pretty empirical. It's going somewhere, and it's making holes in aluminum foil. Little teeny micro to milli, size holes.
That's really interesting. The one that may be the same process or phenomenon that I'm just trying to describe. I just didn't do those empirical tests that you have. But the one thing that I have that's sort of in addition to that, or another piece of empirical evidence is that I have the drywall samples, and that orange stuff is concentrated into little foci or points inside the drywall. The only way it could get the only way it could get into the drywall, as I see it, is it was manufactured in situ.
Yeah, you would. I saw it. I was up in Canada, maybe when I saw this. No, it was in the States. It was in Washington State, and I went into this room, in a motel room, and they had it embedded into the wallpaper, and I could have sworn that they made it like that. It's possible, it's possible that a rich guy would say, okay, well, we'll just do this in case there's any people we want to get rid of that come in this room. I don't know. But
yeah, I get your point. It seems it's far-fetched because it's a harassment tool that's fixed to one point. But it would be really a great way to harass someone who's renting from you, and it would be hotel rooms have people coming through all the time, and the harassment network can just know that if a target comes into the front desk, they just assign them to that room.
Right,
possibly.
That's what they do. In a lot of the motels, the staff works with these people, And I was going to say something. I forgot what it was.
Well, my conception of it, to follow up what you just said, my conception of it is that these harassment networks have high-value recruits, and high-value recruits would be things like cab dispatchers, hotel lobby clerks, people who work in hotels, EMTs, and police officers. Those are all, and many others. But those are all what they say. We got to get these into our network, because if we have these nodes in a community sort of under our purview and beholden to us, then we really have control in this community.
Right. The police is the worst one, because a lot of them, I would say all of them know it, but you still run into some that say they don't, and I don't know, you want to give them the benefit of the doubt, but because they're doing this, and it's not just harassment, it's murder. You have to realize that it's murder, it's disintegration, it's tearing a person down from a normal functioning person to tearing them down so that they can't even do anything. They can't work. They can't maintain themselves. So it's murder. And the police are they're just what they say is they're just doing their job. And maybe some of them don't do it. Maybe some of them, just ignore it. But ignoring it is part of the problem too, because ignoring it is saying that you're not going to help people with this technology or any kind of technology because you haven't been told to do it, and you haven't, and you don't know anything about it. And in a way that's okay, but they need to either quit their job or I don't know what, because it's destroying the country to the point where the country is about to just turn over into a Nazi state.
I agree with your sentiments.
Yeah, and
it's particularly disgusting when the police are involved and other first responders and emergency services that are actually supposed to be out there helping people, and instead they're in some kind of like really twisted silent army of control and torture and slow murder. It's disgusting.
Well, it's all the same thing. You know, it's all part of the harassment. And, you know, these guys are sitting back laughing. You know, this community really needs to be aware of the entire picture. It's all part of the same dynamic. And, you know, we still have quite a ways to go. Quite a ways to go before we have all this addressed, or any of it addressed.
I really appreciate the comments, and thanks for sharing. And maybe these things that I'm describing are not that unique to my situation. Maybe these are some commonalities with a lot of organized harassment, and as James says, the slow killing program. But thank you for those comments, and I will phone you tomorrow. I still have your number. Have a good night.
No problem. Okay. You too.
Okay.
Dr. Matt?
Okay. Yes.
Hi, this is Kathleen Watterson, and welcome. Where have you been for the last 10 years?
Kathleen, it's nice to hear from you. I remember when after I went into hiding for a year, and I wrote my report, and then about 4 months before the report was done, I was writing general sections of it, and then I just started to consume as much information online as possible, and your case was a really inspirational thing, and I of course remember your voice and everything, and I even cited you in my report, so it's really great. You're like a hero of mine. You're a hero of mine.
Thank you. Well, you know what? You're a hero of mine because you are what we need. I mean, you've got the background, and you're all in now, aren't you? I can hear it. So I'm in.
I'm a fighter. I'm in.
I hear it. I love it. I just want to thank you. Good job, Derrick. And thanks so much. And we'll be hearing from you. And anything I can do for you, I'm there. Bye-bye.
All right. I got your back, too. Thanks for the comment.
And Matt, one more thing.
Yes.
It's James.
Hi, James.
Donna wanted me to ask about the seams coming apart in our house that we're renting, and the seams in the wall, the corners, and actually going, you know, how they seam the drywall together. Do you think that is possible, that the microwaves or energy is doing that?
I don't. I can only say that.
Metal material.
Excuse me?
Microwave energy can pass any non-metal material. It doesn't have to be any special material. If it's any drywall, the microwave radiation device can, the radiation waves can pass through any non-metal material.
Oh, that's true. I'm sure James knows that. But let me just answer James's question. James, I did not see any features or evidence that looked like deterioration caused by this electronic harassment in my apartment in Vancouver. So I didn't see anything consistent with that. But of course, we know that the microwave energy does degrade certain materials over time. So I can't really. I didn't see anything like that.
Yeah, I think it probably can do that too. I just wanted to mention something that I have an associate's degree in electronics engineering technology and also biology, and the thing I said about the orange stuff, I'm pretty sure about that because because of the empirical evidence that I found. And yeah, I'm really sure about it. And if you look up chemical vapor deposition, you'll find out that it's an off-the-shelf industrial process that can be used to, strip parts, clean parts. They can get these little pieces to hit within a millimeter, very accurately. It's like a rifle shot, and they break it off from a little deposition or depo on the wall. And these pieces they fire at you are so small you can't see them. And that orange stuff will sting. But they have a beam one many times, and it feels like a laser, like a pointy laser. But it's not the same thing as that orange stuff. I have gotten infections from that, and that's all I wanted to say.
James, I want to say one more thing, and I'm on the fence about this observation. It's one of those very subtle observations that I didn't want to include because I can't be sure about it, but I did have this recollection that when the lights were off in my apartment and the grid was activated, that sometimes I would see a very, very thin visible beam of orangish, like glittery stuff being ejected from those things. So that is a very tentative observation, but it matches what you're saying.
You know what? We've got these. I'm sure that the people on this call can relate to this, getting hit on your skin with a little dot in the middle, and then it's all red around it.
Yeah.
We've got that all over the glass on the second floor, all over. And
all over the glass? The glass.
Yeah, those same markings. Okay. And also, they're everywhere, and you can hear them. They hit the glass and they go, thud, they make a sound. And also, I've got some burn marks on my curtains where it looks like a laser burned my curtains in a few places. Yeah, it's horrible. It really is.
Matt, I was thinking.
Matt, can you hear me? It's Melinda from Sherman Oaks, California.
Hi, hold on.
Hi, Melinda.
Okay, we're getting two people at the same time. Who was speaking first, Melinda?
I think Melinda was speaking first, but it was almost at the same time.
All right.
Yeah,
go ahead, Melinda.
Okay, first off, I want to mention to Derrick that you've got beeps on the line. They've been on calls for the last 3 evenings. I think they're kind of hypnotic and brain training, and they go from 2 to 4, 8 seconds apart. You should talk to the management over there. They're dangerous, I feel, because I don't feel good listening to them. Anyway, I have a standing ray, Matt, over a chair. It doesn't go. I take my 33C08 or CC308 meter, and it's like in the middle of the room near a chair, and it doesn't emanate from the walls, ceiling, floor, or anything. So there's just a standing bit of energy there, strong. And it's like an area in the middle of space that has a high reading. Yes, and it's about 18 inches square. I wonder, could it be where multiple beams are crossing, and each of those beams is low by itself, but at the intersection of them you get a high reading? It could be, but when I move the meter to the floor or to the ceiling or to the wall, it goes soft. It goes down. So it's a standing ray. That's bizarre. Yeah, it is. Okay. And
those of you that are unmuted at the moment, could you please *6 until you speak, because they're coming through your lines and making the beeps. I see several people whose lines that it's coming through, and it's various individuals that are unmuted. So they're hijacking your line to bring in those peeps. So if you could *6 until you speak, and then, okay, now it's quiet. All right, thanks a lot.
Melinda, the only thing that comes to mind on that observation is I don't know. I'm not a physicist. I mean, I do have a scientific training, but unfortunately I'm not a physicist. But what comes to my mind, if you have that observation, is that it's somehow an intersection of multiple fields, or beams that are each one by itself too low, but at that intersection it's being added together, and then you get a reading there. But that's just the one idea off the top of my head.
Yeah, I thought it could be like 3 or 4 Wi-Fi things aimed at a certain point in my unit.
Oh yeah, that's another way to say it. It's maybe some interaction of multiple fields that are just additively or interacting in some way right there at that place where you read it. I don't know. It's hard to say. Okay, 2 more quick things. I do have stripes on my rug, not on the ceiling, that intermittent, like, the dotted yellow line on the street. I have those that you only can see with black light. They're 9 or so feet apart in the living room and the bedroom, parallel lines. And I was looking at helicopters flying right over my head every day. How do they know, unless there's something on the roof? But I'm thinking maybe those lines in my unit is a grid for the flying over of the Air Force and police and everybody else who flies over. That is that's wild.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah, I think, we still don't have answers, and we still certainly don't have help from public institutions, but I think these kinds of observations, if law enforcement ever, I'm talking about the non-corrupt law enforcement, ever got off their butts and wanted to address this, there are forensic traces that you could use to track this stuff back. I mean, people do make observations.
I cannot photograph them. Yeah, I can't. They're so pale, even with the black light on. They will not show up in a photograph. And I have phosphorescent green all over the carpet that only shows up in dark light, but very hard to photograph with my camera. I just have a little Kodak thing. Well, I will say also that when photographing these orange ejection marks or whatever, circles around these emitters and the fluorescent emitters themselves is very tricky. And I'm going to add a series of photos to this recording and upload it to YouTube, or help Derrick do that as a resource to people. And I will say that my photographs are not that impressive, because what happens is when you shine a black light on the drywall and then you photograph it, you're actually getting some backscatter of light, which then kind of swamps the whole photo out. But to my eyes, and you probably can see this too, to your eyes can pick it up much more intensely than a typical photograph can under black light. It takes special. Your eyes are much better at picking it up. Although I did get a photograph. Maybe even renting a camera that might be able to pick up the black light image. Yeah, you probably also need a better black light too. The ones they sell. Well, that goes without saying. Yeah. The drugstore. I mean, it's tricky. It's tricky. What we really wish we had or need are labs and actual government resources on our side. I mean, we're trying to address this with. We're trying to break into Fort Knox here, and nobody is giving us any cooperation. So it's hard. I think everybody realizes that. That's why I say it's going to be one leak in the dike. Pardon the expression, like in Holland, the little boy puts his arm through and stops the leak. It's going to be one leak somewhere that will open this all up. I think so too. I really do think so. I think that when the dike starts to burst, that it will go quickly, because there's a lot of people in the know, both on the non-perp and the perp side, and a lot of people are just waiting for the right time where it's safe to talk about this, because it's like right now in the climate that we're in, it's sad, but it's like career suicide to talk openly about this stuff. Yeah, but don't forget, the president has opened the door also with his wiretapping thing, which, by the way, Obama was wiretapping him for a year with 2 orders from FISA court. So I don't know what the big mystique is about that. So that it's... Was it Melinda, my phone, Derrick? Are they on my phone? Yeah. Well, and one last thing. They're hijacking all the open lines, so that's why I'm asking everybody. Oh, gosh. I have one more quick thing, and then I'm gone. Well, it's not speaking if you could star 6. Yeah, they're burning my leg so bad. They're giving me third-degree burns. It's just awful, and the skin's opening up. It's just almost like a necrosis thing. So, and I can't stop it. Even if no matter what I put on before I feel it, they either have a sensor in there or something. They can turn on a switch and just cause pain, not letting me sleep or anything. It's really, really awful.
Well, I'm really sorry to hear that. I know I've heard you say that before, and I know James.
I say it because not to let. Well, my personal, obviously, they're doing it, but in case it's happening to anyone else, if they had any remedies, that's why I say it. Repeat it. But anyway, okay, Matt,
James
you're so terrific, and you're such a great speaker and communicator, and I really admire. I would rip every drywall piece down here. They took months to get my place ready, and they kept saying, well, it's not ready yet, and now I know why. And it was a mess. The girl before me left a mess, and a lot of people had lived here before me. So it's Unit 304. It's number 7, I call it. So anyway, Derrick, thank you so much. And Matt, you are a real asset to us, and thank you. And please keep up the good work and stay healthy.
Thanks, Melinda.
Thank you, Melinda.
Melinda, I know you're putting yourself on mute again, but you just made me think of something I just want to share with you and everyone else, and that is I just put together a summary video from the protest by editing Todd Giffen's footage, and I think you'll get a kick out of this, but I intentionally edited out the part where Karen Stewart was talking to the Secret Service guy and saying, we're here, we're trying to keep the president safe, and, because they could have a van over there, and over there, and over there, and over there, and then, Donald Trump has a lot of enemies. She basically said that they could, fatally attack Donald Trump, and I thought I would edit that one out of the footage, but when you see it, you'll see the part where I take it out, but you'll know that it was actually in the original.
That's interesting. That's fun. Karen is also terrific.
Yeah.
He doesn't have any fear left. I mean, but he's aware. So, somebody will pick up the gauntlet when there's enough of a leak. I'm convinced of it.
Well, yeah, they'll have to. We're trying to hasten them along. But anyway, thank you for the comments as usual.
Okay, a lot of people have joined us with lines open and all the feeds are coming through. That's what they want you to do, following right along. But if you could star 6 until you speak, that would keep down the peak.
Oh, shoot, I just got hit yesterday. I was about crawling up the walls all last night, having to take root herbs and stuff, and it's and your situation, Matt. Geez, I mean, God, what they did to what the CIA did to Castro is just that's what they're you're a natural enemy, Jesus. Yeah, all over with these dots, So.
Well, anyway, it's good to hear from you, and Derrick, it's been almost 3 hours, and I'm pretty tired, so I'm gonna say goodbye now and let you guys finish your call. But I just wanted to say it's really an honor to be your guest, and I'm really glad to be on your call. And I've been listening on your call for a while now. But thank you so much for the opportunity.
Okay, thanks for being here, Matthew, and I hope this helped you in some way, and certainly helped us, I believe.
Yeah, it was very informative, and I encourage people to get in touch with me. I'll give my email. The email I'm using, along with the pseudonym, Derrick used my real name, which is totally fine. I'll edit it out.
Sorry about that. I wasn't sure about whether to use your. When I sent the announcement, I used Matt Aaron, and then and I thought, well, for the recording that anyway.
It's okay. It's totally okay. It's totally okay. I've been corresponding with you with my real name, and I'm using my real name in all my correspondence with people, and it's just for recordings and stuff. I don't. I just want to keep using my pseudonym, but my email is dr@gmail.com, and if anyone wants to talk about similar experiences or just get in touch, I would be all for that. So thanks again, Derrick. I'll talk to you soon. Thanks so much.
Great. Thanks a lot, Matthew.
Okay. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay. That was Dr. Matt Aaron, and who was our guest this evening. So this time I'm going to see if I can find the echo here. Okay, guys, if you're not speaking, if you could *6.